Hey there, I'm Rachel McAlpine. I'm 85 and I'm learning how to be old. Today we're going to think about sleep and how sleep changes at every stage of our lives, and also how we talk about sleep these days, because that has certainly changed in the last 20 years or so. Rosie Gibson is my guest today. She spent her career studying sleep in old people, especially in those with disorders such as Alzheimer's. Rosie is an associate professor at Massey University. Well, here we are with Rosie Gibson, and we're going to talk about sleep, particularly as it affects us as we get older. Hi, Rosie.
Hello.
Oh, I have to ask you how old you are. Did I warn you about that?
Yes, you did, and I had to think about it, really. Oh. I'm 42.
42. Yeah. Oh, you are almost exactly half my age.
Yeah. Yeah.
You never think about it, do you?
No.
At my age, practically every friend I've got is 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years younger than me.
Yeah, great.
Do you like sleeping?
I like sleeping. Find it comes easily to me. I've always been really interested in sleeping, and certainly sort of made my career out of that interest. So.
Oh, that's good to be researching what you like doing. Yeah, I love sleeping too. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and I'm not kind of one of those people. I think a lot of people develop their careers when they've had an issue themselves with something, and then they want to learn more about it. But I don't have a history of. Oh, I guess I sleptwalk as a child a bit. But yeah, I don't have a unique sleep story. I was always fascinated.
Now, I want to see the big picture of your research, what you're really focused on.
Sleep and ageing, and I guess, that area comes from a background in psychology. I grew up in England and studied psychology there, and when I was studying, I always worked as an aged care assistant, supporting older people and people with dementia in residential care and their own homes. That was kind of my part-time work when I was studying.
Funding your studies.
and I loved working in aged care, and I just found those observations I had around nighttime and sleep and how it changed for some people, and particularly for families who were living with dementia. There's some really unique sleep differences there, some changes and some, hurdles. And so I worked clinically in sleep after my undergrad, but then always had this desire to go back and learn more about how sleep changed across the lifespan, and for older adults, and then particularly for those families affected by things like Alzheimer's disease.
As your career develops, so has an enormous amount of information about sleep, and especially sleep in older people, hasn't it? So it's like a wave, isn't it?
Yeah, there's been a lot of work there. I think the more you do, the more questions you come up with rather than answers, unfortunately. And I think it's a mysterious topic. It's we all do sleep, so we've all got something to say about sleep. When I came to New Zealand to do my master's thesis, I actually did that in baby sleep, because at the time I was like, I'm really interested in older adults, and there just wasn't the funding. And so when I came back to do my PhD, I was like, this is going to be my mission. But there was actually nothing really in New Zealand around older New Zealanders' sleep. And so we did a lot of work, there's lots of different methods to trying to understand it. So we have these basic kind of surveys, but really that's just giving us a few numbers on the page. A lot of my work has been around capturing people's stories. How has sleep changed in healthy ageing? How has it changed, particularly for people who do have dementias or Alzheimer's disease? So where are there areas that we can actually support people with their sleep, rather than just to define sleep problems based on a score on a
It's all very well to find out stuff, but you really want to help people. That's the point of it, isn't it? And you do,
Oh, hopefully.
And so that leads us to the project that I was involved in, Words on Sleep. Now, Rosie and Mary Breheny asked me to join them in a study called Words on Sleep. That's part of a larger program called Sensationalizing Sleep. Now, there's a clue. Funded by a Marsden Fast Start grant. Now, this focuses on the words that are used to describe sleep and talk about sleep in public health messaging and in the media. So, we ran 3 workshops involving about 40 people over 75, mostly in their 80s. First, there was a presentation and discussion about sleep and headlines. Then we used a new way of gathering data, writing poems about sleep. And the themes that came up in these poems, I can tell you they're very different from those we see in the media.
Words on Sleep's a really exciting project, and it's been fantastic having you involved, Rachel. And we're really interested around the language that's used to describe how we should be sleeping or what sleep is. And so we've focused a lot on the media, you know, the messages in the newspapers and so on, and we've looked at particular age groups. And so to really get an idea of, how is sleep described in public health messaging or implicitly in media messaging.
What did you find?
Well, when we looked at newspapers around sleep and ageing, we see a lot of messages around, your sleep's inevitably going to decline.
You're doomed.
You're not going to sleep well when you get older. If you don't sleep well, you're more likely to get condition, like dementia or die younger. And a lot of those messages they do have some kind of science behind them, but the messaging, the headlines are always quite sensationalised. And also we see things around sleep as a remedy. So, quick fixes for looking and feeling younger. So if you sleep well, you won't have such baggy skin, or, your eyes will look better, or you'll knock years off your life. So that is kind of, I think, that idea of it being a remedy and a risk. Lots of simple solutions often offered for sleep, but then alongside these ideas of how complicated and involved sleep is. So the messages are not particularly usul in the media.
They're so mixed, aren't they? I mean, from what you're saying, if I was worried about it, I'd be reading these terrible headlines telling me that if I don't sleep well tonight, I'm going to get some horrible disease or look really old, which I do anyway. Who cares? And then on the other hand, you have messages saying, have some hot milk before you go to sleep. Real things to do. And they don't quite match.
They don't necessarily
meet. Fair.
Yeah. So for all of these projects, we've been looking at what does it look like in the media, but then actually engaging with the audience to say, you're aware of these kind of messages, what do you think of them? And then giving an opportunity to kind of create something that's more meaningful to represent the reality. So the techniques, the methods, the research methods we've used have been different for different age groups. But I think, when we came across your work and, your passion in this area, we thought, to have Rachel involved and to use the art of poetry is a great medium for research and for bringing people together to create more positive messaging around sleep and ageing. And we had a fantastic response. We were nervous, weren't we, about how many people would come, but we had over 40 people, mostly in their 80s, come to 3 groups. And I think, reflecting was a really positive experience, and people enjoyed themselves.
And they did. They had fun. And, we learned a lot. I'm not writing a thesis on it, but
no, poor George. We do have a thesis student. Georgia Knowles is now working with that, which is going to be fantastic.
So then I took over that second half of the workshop, basically using a model poem. We tried to find model poems, and we didn't find a lot already written. I had to write one of them. Shakespeare wrote quite a lot. Healing process is part of it. Also, in the sonnets, lots of sonnets about how you can't sleep if you're madly in love.
Right.
Especially if somebody's doing you wrong. And then there's quite a bit about sleep as the little death, which was a way of looking at sleep in those days. Kind of almost literal, like a small imitation of death, which is not how we think of it now. You found My Bed is a Boat. Old people will know this one.
Yeah.
And this is like sleep as an adventure. All about dreaming. My bed is like a little boat. Nurse helps me in when I embark. She girds me in my sailor's coat and starts me in the dark. At night I go on board and say good night to all my friends on shore. I shut my eyes and sail away. and see and hear no more. And sometimes things to bed I take, as prudent sailors have to do. Perhaps a slice of wedding cake, perhaps a toy or two. No cell phone or iPad, I notice.
No.
All night across the dark we steer, but when the day returns at last, safe in my room beside the pier, I find my vessel fast. So that's a really positive.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, it's a great one. And this funny little one called Sleep by John B. Tabb. When he is a little chap, we call him Nap. When he somewhat older grows, we call him Doze. When his age by hours we number, we call him Slumber. Anyway, that's actually the beginning of a bit of research about how sleep varies over your age.
Yeah, and the words we use change, and what's okay at one age doesn't seem to be okay in another age.
You found this wonderful poem, I'll just read a little bit of it, by Jewel Coury, and it's called Sleep Hygiene, because this is a modern poem. I'll just read a few lines. A bed should be a tender slab, devoid of insects, especially bed bugs.
Yeah.
A tired woman should be able to lie across diagonally, headache to hag feet. A bed should exist in crystalline silence. A bed should be free of lime, and liars. One should be able to enter the bed and think, I could fly far away in this, I could die. I could just die. So they took to that one. Yeah, and I think about that poem quite a bit. I get into bed and I think, oh, it's so good in bed. It's so snuggly and soft. And
and that's quite often the thing that's not represented in sleep-related research. The focus has always been on what's the disorder, or how much are you getting, or when are you getting it, and how are you performing in the morning, rather than that kind of experience of sleep and experience of dreaming, or the sociology around, when and how and with whom you're sleeping, and what makes for a good sleep. Well,
they did bring up a lot of those things in their poems that they wrote. So this is what I wrote. My best sleep. The best sleep I ever had was in a tiny tent on a prickly paddock in Golden Bay. My skin was cosy with sunburn, my ankles a little bit itchy, and the night was warm and dry and bright. I dragged my sleeping bag outside. Around me stars were foaming, crickets were trilling, waves were hushing, a motherly roo-roo woo-hooing, and I slept in the deepest trough of blood-red love for the universe and the luck of it. Yeah. Those two poems are one about what a bed should be.
With a kind of inspiration.
To sort of kick-started what they wrote. And
so we had the kind of morning conversations, and we bought some of the headlines as well to kind of get them rocked up, that's not the right word, but inspired. And I think what we found, with the conversations there was a lot of kind of rebutting those headlines, but also, I don't know, feelings of kind of annoyance, not willing to really engage with them. And I think that did kind of prime them to present sleep in a more positive light. And I think a lot of the poems we saw coming out of the afternoon, and they are still being collated and analysed now by a lovely student, Georgia, but we saw a lot of reference to the place of sleep. And
on yachts. And in foreign places, on holiday.
Those memories of sleep.
Yeah.
And how it really served as a kind of the security of sleep.
Yeah, they emphasised that a lot, didn't they? It's a safe place.
And the joys of it. And I think that, that works quite nice. There's a lot of literature in sort of sociology also around vulnerabilities of sleep, how we render our bodies at risk, when we are off guard, sleeping. So I think maybe that came through with some of the poems when thinking around the luxury of having a safe space and that ability to
Because not everybody
sleep.
does.
No,
indeed.
A bed should welcome, a bed should invite, a bed should be cosy. A tired woman knows the joy of stretching out, lying flat, letting go. A bed should exist where quiet invites. A bed should exist where dark curtains hang. The day view is gone, the coziness closing in. The joy, the bliss, as sleep unfolds. Dreams of calm water and warmth. Bliss.
Bliss. Lovely.
This is another a bed should be one. A bed should be blue as the sky to float in. A bed should be quiet for silent thoughts. A bed should welcome sleep, though not insist. I love going to bed, then rising for a new day.
Yes, quite a few of the poems spoke about that waking up from sleep, didn't they? And in a very positive way, mostly, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
That how terrific it is to actually wake up after a good night's sleep, all ready for the next day. Yeah.
And that resonates with a lot of the kind of interviews and focus groups, we've done, talking to older Māori in particular, just being happy to wake up in the morning and, to carry on and to see the family and to engage and do the things we love. Sleep it punctuates our days, our lives. It happens to us. Eventually, even if we feel that we struggle with it, it does come.
Yes.
And then we wake up and we go again. And
I wanted to tell you about a conversation I had with my grandson, aged 13. A year and a half ago, he actually said to me, I love sleeping. It's one of my hobbies. I'm good at it. And I thought, oh, good, I'm glad to hear that. But now, of course, teens is different. And I asked him the other day, did you have any good dreams last night? He said, I had a terrible night. Mind you, I should also say another grandson at the age of 5 told me he had the worst day in his entire life because he forgot his play lunch and his sister hit him with a glove. Yeah. And, so the idea of really, really terrible might differ.
It's all perspective.
Yeah. But anyway, that's what he said. And I said, well, why was it terrible? Well, I woke up at about 1 o'clock and I didn't go back to sleep till 3. And why was that terrible? I said, well, I was lying in bed and awake. And why was that terrible? You feel all right today, don't you? You did get enough sleep. I said, yes, I thought about it. It was just that idea that it was intrinsically horrible and disastrous if you didn't continuously sleep all night. Yeah. And I thought a lot. Of course, after doing our workshop,
you think more about it.
I was thinking, look, the language, where did he pick that up? That it is a disaster if, in spite of getting enough sleep, you actually had some time in bed when you weren't asleep.
I think we are more and more being sort of pressured to try and have a consolidated night of sleep, or we see these kind of rules around you need to get 7 to 9 hours, or you're at higher risk of this and that. So, and sometimes those ideals sit around what we've grown up with, but also aligning with society. We try and fit sleep into as short a period as we can, so we've got more time to be productive, to go to school, to go to work, to be awake and doing. So a lot of views around sleep is it's kind of not a waste of time, but we're not doing anything when we're asleep, which of course isn't true. We know that our brain and body is doing a lot of things behind the scenes when we're sleeping, but we can't be making money, and we certainly know pre-industrially people would have more split sleeps and things like that. So periods of being awake have been kind of problematized, maybe a bit more.
Problematized, that's a very interesting word, and it's true, because people are doing very different things if they're lying awake. And if you're ruminating and going over and over some bad thing that had happened during the day, or dwelling on really bad things, well, then that is not good at all. But if you're thinking up what you're going to do the next day, or think of something nice that happened the day before, and you're dozing off anyway, that's not a bad way to be.
Yeah, those
boredom
periods
is supposed to be good for you.
Yeah, these periods of going in and out of sleep and even dreaming itself, we know of a kind of like a period of creativity and restfulness and can be really positive. And certainly that's what we found in interviews with older New Zealanders, Māori and non-Māori. There's quite cultural differences as well around how we perceive these periods of sleeplessness. Yeah, we're increasingly tracking our sleep and counting our sleep and feeling more concerned around it. And I think there's a difference there between periods of time when sleep does come unstuck. Obviously, there's chronic sleep disorders as well that need to be kept an eye out for. If there's no real reason and it's chronic and we're feeling very tired in the daytime, then that's when we need to be more concerned. But this kind of new idea around tracking sleep and perfecting sleep.
It can be counterproductive.
It can be, that's right. Yeah,
it makes you start worrying about something that you weren't worried about before.
Yeah, and actually we've got another short poem we had kind of fits in quite nicely with that.
Yeah.
It goes, good sleep, bad sleep, who can tell? Whatever works is perfect. I'll sleep and dream and be content, and wake and dream to live again. Each day I live is one more day to be. To stir, to urge, to laugh and cry, I am content. That's quite nice, isn't it?
That's beautiful.
Again, that idea of just waking up in the morning and
being happy
yourself
to be alive.
Another day older.
Being amazed to be alive too at a certain age, because it's not a given.
Yeah. We know ourselves really well and what works well for our own sleep, and so sometimes taking those like top 5 tips, so it doesn't always apply to all.
No. You've got endless tips actually, and one might work for you, but you don't need 10 if one works. Or if you know perfectly well, if you read Anne of Green Gables before you go to bed, then you're going to sleep well, whatever it is.
But also some of those ideas, people know, general things around things like caffeine and alcohol.
Yeah.
They're not great for our sleep, or watching scary films, but we all take those rules with a pinch of salt, and we have to do what works best for us and still actually enjoy life and sleep.
It would be a terrible shame if you got into bed and you didn't absolutely love that feeling of snuggling into underneath your covers and being cosy and warm. Some of them wrote about that. And safe.
The haven of sleep. That came through more so than those kind of quick fixes.
I think that word haven came up in several.
A lot, yeah.
It's not true for everybody that it's a haven, and it is both a right, a human right, I think, and a privilege to have a safe...
the spaces of sleep. But and again, that's where it can be quite hard when we have this kind of sleep health promotion messaging around making sure you have a quiet space, a dark space, the right temperature. That's not realistic for everybody, even to have a bed to themselves. Because certainly in a lot of our questionnaires, I think, again, sort of going backwards a bit, but we sort of see physiologically research showing indicators that sleep gets worse with ageing, for example. More sleep disorders, this, that and the other. When we go and talk to older people or do surveys, there's kind of a plateau, really, and there's no rapid increase in self-reported sleep disorders or problems. And when we talk to people, they say, so it's not so bad, and so what constitutes a sleep problem is not necessarily the same thing.
I'm glad to hear that. Just because somebody analysing your statistics might perceive that you've got a problem doesn't mean to say that you're
suffering it.
No.
And again, I think there's those cultural differences as well, age-related and cultural differences where, maybe lying awake at 4 o'clock in the morning's okay. So if you have had a bad sleep, you might decide not to drive that day or to have a nap. So being mindful that it can impact things like being safe or being more grumpy or tetchy or short-tempered. It's when it's a chronic, when it's night after night, or if you've got something like a respiratory-related sleep disorder, someone keeps nudging you about, get those kind of things looked at. But the day-to-day is, like you say, taking each night as it comes. And
Elsie was my granddaughter. The poem was when she was my life coach at the age of 5. Now, before I read this one, I want to tell you about another story of a 4-year-old girl. It was summertime in Christchurch, so that's quite early in the morning, the sun comes up. And this little 4-year-old girl was waking them up at 4 or 5, yelling out at the birds. And she was saying, "Shut up, birds! Shut up, birds!" And her parents had a little chat to her and said, "Well, we shouldn't shout at the birds like that. I mean, they're just singing a beautiful song for us, and this is their time to wake up. So just listen and enjoy." And so the next morning at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, they heard this child shouting, "Thank you, birds! Thank you, birds!" I can remember that. What time is the right time to wake up when you can't even tell the time?
Yeah.
You're ready to get up. This is Elsie's poem. She kind of knew everything at this age, as they do.
Yeah.
So she's telling me, actually, morning is pink. If it's pink, it's morning. And if it's not pink, you have to go back to sleep for a long, long time. So I hope you remember that.
It's nice. And I think both those examples, indicate we have this knowledge around what day and night are and what the rules around sleep are, and I mean, sleep's such a massive part. It's a third of our lives, right? In theory. So we know a lot about sleep ourselves, and we've learnt a lot of those environmental and social cues around what it should and shouldn't.
Well, she had it sussed, but it wouldn't work in the middle of winter in Wellington.
No, that's true. No, that's lovely.
She'd be late for school. Oh, well, Rosie, thank you very, very much for coming on my podcast and telling me heaps of stuff.
Yeah.
And
it's great to have another opportunity to look at the poems. And, it's a really novel approach to understanding sleep.
Thank you. And I hope you have a very good night's sleep tonight.
I will, yes. Yeah.
And even some nice dreams with a bit of luck.
Yeah.